All right, the next thing I'd like to show you is the vector display. So, coming over here to the mode buttons, again on the right hand side, we'll hit the vector display, and that comes up as such. Now again, it can be full screen, or you could have it within the quadrant like I showed you before, the four-way quadrant. Menu comes up. It allows you to make adjustments in regards to the intensity of the trace for the vector display, adjusting the color of the vector display, adjusting the intensity of the scale itself. You can dim that down or brighten that back up. You can change the graticule to a different color, like we mentioned before, so it can match the waveform. Let me just cycle back through to get to yellow. You can hit F5 and bring up the IQ axis when you're doing flush tone comparisons. And then we come to the end here, we go to F7. That brings us back up to the main menu, once again for the vector display. Coming over to F2, allows you to select times 5, making it a little bit easier on the vector display to see what's happening, what's going on. You also happen to have an IQ function. Variable gain can also be handy. Instead of using the time 5, once you have it in variable, now the FD control, the function dial control we talked about before, allows you to magnify it to whatever size that works out best. Coming back here, we put it back to calibrated, and F4 brings us to line select. We can turn on line select just like we did in the waveform display, and just like in the waveform display, the line number that we're looking at appears right here, and the function dial control allows you to control it as to what line that you want to take a look at. Whether the signal be interlaced or progressive allows you to choose field 1 or field 2 or the entire frame. Up menu brings you back up to the main menu, where F5 allows you to select markers in effect. Okay? Markers actually end up appearing, as you can see, may or may not be able to see that the center marker, the center target now has a green indicator to make it a little bit easier to be able to see black levels at that particular point. We'll turn that back off and we'll go to display. And from here, this is where you can choose between looking at the traditional vector display, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and our 5-bar display that you may not be familiar with. Our 5-bar display is actually our Gamut display. And that makes it very easy to see whether the signal happens to be legal or not. If you look at the 5-bar display, you'll see that it looks at the luminance levels and also looks at the RGB levels of the signal coming in, and indicates almost like a VU meter whether or not those levels happen to be legal or illegal, whether they're out of gamut or not. So if you saw that those bluish-green areas turn red, that's indicating that the signal is actually out of gamut, it's actually illegal, so that you can make adjustments either when you're out shooting in production or when you're working in post-production. The last bar that you see there, which is a composite bar, shows you whether or not analog signal coming from that digital signal, whether or not that would be legal. So in other words, from a digital signal coming in, if you were to convert that to composite, would that composite signal be legal or not? Okay? And indicate the same way, if it happens to be illegal, it'll actually show up as red. We'll go back in this particular case, and we'll actually change the sequence like that. And we're going to go and switch back from 5-bar to the regular vector display. And one thing we didn't do is we didn't turn off line select. So I'm going to do that right now. And again, hopefully you can see just how easy the unit is to operate, again, with just 2 levels in most cases. And then we'll come back here to display. And just like the waveform display, F6 happens to be the thumbnail, where you can decide whether you want to have the audio and or the picture displayed down below, or whether you want to have the histogram displayed along with the vector, just like you saw in the waveform operation. All right? So with that being said, we'll go back up now to the main menu, and we'll go to Color System. F1 allows you to select the normal default component display, or if you wanted to see what the signal would look like in your traditional analog composite type of vector display, you can bring that up and take a look at it in that fashion. It actually even puts in kind of setup to make it look like an analog signal. This is also where you would select between 100% and 75% color bars, depending on the color bar signal that you have in. All right. Now we're back up to the main menu. Before I do that, let me just come back here and we'll switch it back to component. And then we'll go back up menu. And that covers the vector display.